Welcome back to All Inclusive, the series where every corridor echoes, every shadow lingers, and the signal never truly fades. The static had always felt like noise, random, chaotic, but tonight it was different. I sat in the dim light of my desk, replaying the recordings again and again. And the longer I listened, the less random it became. Buried inside the hiss and distortion, something was trying to take shape. Patterns, pauses, fragments of words that bent themselves into form, only to collapse before they could be understood. Like a mouth whispering from the other side of glass. The signal wasn't background anymore. It was deliberate, and that made it worse. Avery leaned closer to the headphones, scribbling notes in the margins of a journal already overflowing with half-finished ideas. But this wasn't half-finished. This was a message. One meant for her. She stopped the tape. The room plunging into silence, so thick it almost hummed on its own. Her pen hovered over the page. And then, almost in spite of herself, she pressed play again. This time, the static broke. A single phrase bled through. Low. Distorted. But clear enough to recognize. You've heard us before. Across town, Micah sat alone. His hands pressed against his face. Eyes shut tight. Trying to chase away dreams that didn't belong to him. But no matter how hard he tried, they clung like smoke. Dreams of the resort. Dreams of walking corridors he swore he'd never seen. Conversations with people whose names meant nothing. Until Avery's recordings repeated them back to him. He jolted awake, gasping, the taste of salt water thick in his mouth. And when he opened his eyes, he realized his hand was already clutching a note. A note he didn't remember writing. The words were simple. A date. And a single phrase. You were there. Micah didn't know if it was a warning or a memory resurfacing from somewhere deeper. But one truth became impossible to ignore. The signal wasn't random. It was reaching for him, too. When Avery and Micah finally met, the tension was heavier than the air around them. Neither wanted to admit how much the static had crawled into their lives. But denial couldn't survive long. Avery pressed play on her recorder. The static hissed, then broke into that same fractured voice. Micah's breath caught, because before the tape finished, he whispered the last word in perfect unison with it. Silence followed. And that silence said everything. The signal wasn't a broadcast. It was targeted. It was chasing them. Micah pushed back from the table, his chair scraping too loud in the small room. No. No, this isn't possible. It's just noise. But his hands were shaking, and when Avery looked at him, she could see it, the same recognition that haunted her every night. They weren't listening to the static. The static was listening to them. And then, a third voice cut through. Not from the tape. Not from their memories. But live. Present. Carrow. His voice was steady, low, and far too calm. I told you not to follow this thread, he said. I've been hearing it longer than either of you. And if you were smart, you'd stop before it finishes what it started. The air froze. Neither Avery nor Micah moved. Because they hadn't called him. They hadn't even told him where they were. But somehow, he was in the signal too. The line crackled. His words distorted. And then, silence. As if he had chosen to step out, leaving only the static in his wake. Micah's jaw tightened. Avery's pen dug into the page. They both knew this wasn't coincidence. Carrow wasn't just listening. He was part of the signal itself. Hours blurred. Avery replayed the recordings again and again, this time searching not for words, but for patterns. And she found them, hidden in the pauses, buried in the distortion. Numbers, coordinates, dates, pieces that only made sense when layered together, pieces that spelled out a map. Micah leaned over the table, eyes narrowing at the paper she filled with circles and lines. He knew the place, the dates, and one detail hit him like a knife. A name. A name he had lost back at the resort. Someone he swore never came out with him. And yet here it was, etched into the signal, as if the static had been carrying it all this time. Micah's chest heaved. This isn't just data. It's personal. It's pulling from us. Avery didn't argue, because she knew he was right. If the static was a net, then they were the bait. Micah broke first, slamming his fist against the table, the fear finally boiling over. It's a loop. It's always been a loop. We're just pieces, playing our parts until it resets again. Avery reached across the table, gripping his hand before he could spiral further. Her eyes held steady. If it's a loop, then maybe we can find where it starts. And if we find the start, we can break it. Her voice carried no certainty, but it carried something else. Resolve. Micah stared at her, breath unsteady, until the fire in his chest dimmed. And then he nodded. They had no choice but to follow the signal, even if it meant walking back into the very heart of what they tried to escape. The tape hissed again, but this time, it wasn't Avery pressing play. It was the signal itself, the recorder word to life, reels spinning on their own, and the phrase it carried froze them both in place. You've already been here. We're waiting. The room's light flickered.
Shadows bent.
And then, the whispers began. Not from the recorder, not from the tape, but from the walls around them, from the air itself. Micah's chest tightened. Avery's pen slipped from her hand, because in that moment, they both realized the signal wasn't reaching for them anymore. It had already arrived. This was episode 9 of All Inclusive, Signal Breakthrough. The static grows sharper, the corridors draw closer, and the end waits just beyond the next door. Stay tuned for the series finale of All Inclusive. Until then, watch the shadows, listen closely, and remember, in the Mysteriverse, the signal is always listening back.